So this French health worker went to Ukraine for 16 days, and he witnessed a bunch of war crimes that were committed by the Azov Battalion, which is this infamous Nazi, neo-Nazi battalion that's incorporated into the Ukrainian armed forces and receiving all sorts of weapons, courtesy of Israel, the US, and UK, and so on. And this is what he saw. Let's take a look, and then we'll discuss.
Allez, je viens vous aider. Et voilà. Et du coup,
pour aider en tant qu'infirmier, enfin,
exactement, à la base,
les soins, tout ça.
Pour la population. Hein.
Pour la population, absolument.
Voilà, pour aider les femmes et les enfants et tous les réfugiés et la population ukrainienne.
C'était quand vous êtes parti quand
Là, je suis revenu il y a une dizaine de jours.
D'accord.
Donc,
et vous avez passé 16 jours.
16 jours, exactement. Tout à fait, en 2 fois.
C'est ça, en 2 fois, c'est ça. Et vous étiez à Kiev, vous étiez où? Enfin,
j'ai fait Kiev, Boutcha, le fameux Boutcha.
Boutcha dont tout le monde parle. Oui.
Voilà, où tout le monde parle. Nous, principalement, juste pour rappeler ce qu'on faisait, c'est donc des transports d'équipements médicaux et des médicaments vers des hôpitaux précaires et aussi sur les orphelinats. Parce qu'il y a des orphelinats...
Vous avez eu des choses assez terribles, je crois.
Tout à fait. Alors, je vais assumer totalement ce que je vous dis. Moi, sur place, j'ai été témoin de crimes de guerre. J'ai vu beaucoup de crimes de guerre. Les seuls crimes de guerre que j'ai vus pendant les jours où j'étais sur place ont été perpétrés par des militaires ukrainiens. Et non pas par des militaires russes.
Ce qui ne veut pas dire
ce qui ne veut pas dire exactement, j'allais y venir, qu'il n'y a pas de crimes de guerre russes, mais il y en a aussi au niveau ukrainien.
Vous avez assisté.
Et on n'en parle pas. C'est ça, moi. Quand je suis rentré en France, j'ai été extrêmement choqué, même des personnes qui sont invitées sur les plateaux télé à droite à gauche. 80% de ces personnes-là ne sont pas allées au moment où il y a la guerre et se permettent de parler, etc. Ça m'insupporte. Parce que entre ce que je vois et ce que j'entends sur les plateaux télé et ce que j'ai vu sur place, il y a une autoroute. Pour moi, c'est abominable. Je vais par exemple parler des militaires Azov. Les militaires Azov, à la base...
Mais vous avez vu où ils sont partout?
Ils sont partout.
Ah, pas seulement à Azovstal, ou etc.
Même à Lviv. Ils sont même à Lviv, à l'ouest. Ils ont leur scratch, avec vous savez, le beau scratch néo-nazi, ça se tient aussi à le dire. Pour moi, ce qui me choque énormément, c'est que l'Europe donne quand même de l'armement à des militaires, pour moi, néo-nazis, avec un sigle néo-nazi. On n'en parle pas, il suffit de regarder. C'est un ancien sigle SS qui est brandi partout en Ukraine. Et ça
partout, on le voit partout.
Partout. Et ça ne pose aucun problème. Moi, j'ai travaillé avec ces gens-là, je leur ai donné des médicaments, etc. Vous savez quelles étaient leurs conversations devant moi? Parce que je comprends un petit peu l'ukrainien et le russe, et beaucoup parlent anglais. Ils rigolaient de se dire que s'ils croisaient des juifs ou des noirs, qu'il les dépècerait.
Ah, carrément.
Voilà
ce qu'ils disaient devant vous.
Voilà ce qu'ils disaient devant moi, et c'était leur conversation qui les faisait vachement rigoler. Voilà ce qu'ils disaient sur les juifs et sur les noirs.
Et qu'est-ce que vous avez vu? Vous dites que vous avez assisté.
J'ai vu donc des militaires russes qui ont été capturés et qui ont été donc du coup déjà bien malmenés et qui ont été, on va dire, attachés. Et en fait, on était dans une sorte de hangar, et ces militaires russes qui ont été capturés arrivaient dans des petites fourgonnettes par 3 ou par 4. Les militaires Azov ukrainiens leur demandaient qui est l'officier, qui est l'officier. Je vais vous expliquer pourquoi. Ou ils répondaient pas, ou ils répondaient. Chaque militaire qui descendait de cette fourgonnette se prenait une balle de Kalachnikov dans le genou. Alors qu'ils étaient sans défense, j'ai des vidéos qui l'attestent. Sinon, je ne me permettrais pas de sortir des trucs pareils. J'ai des vidéos où on montre des militaires russes en train de se prendre des balles dans le genou. On ne sait pas trop pourquoi, parce qu'ils ne répondent pas à des questions. Et les gens qui avaient le malheur donc de dire « c'est moi l'officier », se prenaient une balle dans la tête. Voilà comment ça se passe à Boutcha. Voilà comment ça se passe en Ukraine, du moins pour le bataillon ukrainien Azov. Ils pourront dire ce qu'ils veulent. Moi, j'étais là, j'ai vu ce qui s'est passé. Tout ça, on n'en parle pas. C'est vraiment... Je vais vous raconter encore quelque chose de beaucoup plus grave. Vous avez des bombardements tout le temps, on voit la télé, etc. J'ai vu donc des journalistes américains il y a des bombardements qui atterrissent dans un petit parc que vous
Tout
avez
ça,
dû voir
près d'où
à côté de Boutcha, entre
À côté de
Boutcha,
Boutcha.
à l'est de Boutcha.
D'accord.
Et ces Américains donc font une vidéo et disent ben voilà, c'est les bombardements russes, ça atterrit dans un parc, c'est inadmissible et tout. Je vais les voir, je dis mais pourquoi vous dites ça, etc. et tout. Ah, on m'a dit mais c'est pas grave, ça fera des images. Et vous savez ce que c'était ces bombardements? En fait, vous avez des petits obus. Donc vous aviez, si vous voulez, une cible qui était russe à l'époque, il y a quelques semaines, et vous aviez donc une équipe d'Azov avec qui j'étais, qui était en train de régler donc des petits mortiers pour envoyer des obus qui se règlent, si vous voulez, avec des petites à la main, d'accord? Et en fait, ça avait été mal réglé. Et ça arrive une fois sur deux, une fois sur trois. Donc ces obus, au lieu d'atterrir à 100 mètres plus loin où il y avait justement les militaires ou du matériel russe, atterrit dans le petit parc. Et on fait passer ça pour des bombardements russes. Quoi, on ne parle pas de ça. Et donc tous les bombardements, toutes les bombes, tous les obus qui atterrissent à Boutcha, à Kiev, etc., c'est du russe. Il faut arrêter.
Oui,
il faut un petit peu réfléchir.
Il y a des deux côtés, les crimes se font des deux côtés.
Mais bien sûr, et encore autre chose. Et là, je vais enfoncer le clou, mais c'est pas grave, j'en assumerai les conséquences. J'étais à Lviv, j'étais à l'hôtel, il y a eu des bombardements. J'étais à 500 mètres d'un missile qui atterrit, où je dormais, tout a pété, les glaces, etc. Je vais tout de suite sur place, et en fait, on s'aperçoit que les 5 missiles, il y a 4 missiles qui ont tapé des dépôts d'armement. Des dépôts d'armement qui venaient d'Europe, qui avaient été stockés à Lviv en attente que ça soit amené à Kiev et dans des unités. Vous savez où est-ce qu'il les stocke, l'armement qui arrive d'Europe? Eh bien, il les stocke dans des locaux et dans des maisons civiles, sans que les gens le sachent.
Okay. Wow. So I have a lot to say. I have a lot to say about this, and franchement, c'est un truc de ouf, hein. Franchement. He's absolutely right. There are war crimes on both sides. I mean, the one of the again, I'm not trying to make light of it, but one of the more minor ones was POWs, for example, how they were filming them and publishing that. Both sides did that, and I openly criticized that at the beginning of the war, because you had the Ukrainians filming Russian POWs and publishing that, and vice versa. That's not okay. That's a violation of the Geneva Convention. Now he's obviously making he's talking about much more serious things. And yeah, that's how it is, man. You cannot sit here and say, oh, there's only Russian war crimes, which is what the West is saying. They're saying the only war crimes are being committed by Russia, and everything that people say about Ukraine committing war crimes is Russian propaganda. No, faut arrêter les conneries, là. You can't have... it's a war. I'm not saying it's okay, like that, just because there's some people say, oh, well, it's a war, so, whatever, things happen. No, that doesn't make it okay, but you have to understand that this is one of the most brutal, violent, disgusting aspects of humanity. It's war, unfortunately. And people do really horrible things on both sides. It's like in World War II. It's not just the Nazis and the Japanese who committed war crimes. The British did them. The Americans did them. Right? Perhaps not to the same extent, but nevertheless. And so I think it's important to understand that, to get the starting point straight. Because this guy's probably being attacked left and right now as some sort of, propagandist or something. And I think it's important to take what he's saying seriously, because he's actually been there. And he's saying something that you're not going to hear on mainstream media. One thing that he just mentioned in the last minute about how the Ukrainian forces were firing at Russian forces, and because something c'était mal réglé, so basically it wasn't adjusted properly, or the sights weren't calibrated well, and the shells were landing in a park, for example, instead of hitting the Russian forces. Basically they were misfiring some rounds and hitting the wrong targets, and then blaming that on the Russians. Like, oh, you see, the Russians hit this park. I remember this trick from Syria. So what you would have is, especially when you had these like so-called rebels, moderate rebels, surrounding Damascus, they were in districts like Jobar. My cousin's university, the architecture faculty in the University of Damascus, go look up right now on BBC. There's still the headline from 2013, how I think it was 13, how many students were killed? Several architecture students were killed. Here, I'm going to look it up for you. Massacre, really awful, awful stuff. And my point is with that, yeah, here it is. So 28th of March, 2013. And I'm not going to show you the picture, but they say it was 15 students. Awful, terrible stuff, right? And my point is that the rebels would do this. The so-called freedom fighters, they were hitting things like the University of Damascus, and then they would blame the government, right? Things like this. And it's the same tactic that you're seeing in Ukraine. So they actually commit the errors. They commit the mistakes. You could, whether it's on purpose or not is another issue. But they would do the crime of hitting the civilian targets and then blame it on Assad or the Russians as well in Syria, right? So that's an important thing to distinguish. And always ask yourself, who benefits from this story, right? Another thing that he was talking about was how the racism was rampant. I mean, that was horrible. That was disgusting. What the racist things that they were saying against black people and Jews. What the Azov Battalion were saying, right? He said that they were joking about this in front of him. I mean, does that surprise you at all? No. These are Nazis, neo-Nazis. Again, some people view them as a continuation of Bandera, who actually collaborated with the Nazis in World War II. So, it's the point is they are not exactly fans of people of color, of black people, of Jews. I mean, someone like Stepan Bandera, who is idolized by the Azov Battalion and these neo-Nazis in Ukraine, he participated in the Holocaust. He was complicit in killing Jews, in killing Poles, right? So this is very important to understand because that mindset has continued. And I want to be very clear on something. This does not mean that Ukrainians are Nazis or everybody in Ukraine is a Nazi or hates Jews. This is ridiculous. Of course not. But you have to understand that when we talk about groups like Azov or Right Sector, yes, they are a tiny minority, but on the battlefield, and this is a war we are talking about, on the battlefield, they are some of the most effective fighters, right? They are battle hardened. They have received some of the best training. Remember, NATO has been training, in general, Ukrainian forces for interoperability. So they are trained up to NATO standards and they can be plucked out and put in modular pieces, so to speak. And my point is that when you have a group like that making the decisions effectively on the battlefield and altering the course of the war, then the percentage that they make up of the overall population becomes irrelevant. If you look at Syria, for example, Al-Qaeda and Daesh are obviously a tiny, bloody, minuscule portion of the population. Most of them, not most of them, but a good chunk are not even Syrian. They're foreign fighters. They're coming from Tunisia, and they're coming from Afghanistan and Libya and so on. And in the end, who is more important in deciding the course of the war? Those groups. So they would tell you, but it's not true. They're not Al-Qaeda. That's just Assad propaganda. And the rebels are actually moderate. Dude, the moderate rebels got fucking wiped out, not just by Russia and the Syrian government, but by Daesh, by ISIS and Al-Qaeda. It's like gang warfare. Do you understand? Truly, like gang warfare. They started bickering with each other, fighting with each other. This group refused to coalesce with the other one. This guy, refused to pledge loyalty, go do his own thing. He'd get killed. It's a complete bloody mess. That's why you have like 50 plus, I joke and I call it 50 flavors of jihad. But do you understand? At the end of the day, the ones that were the battle-hardened ones that had fought against the Americans in Iraq, that had real combat experience and were effectively altering and molding the course of the war, were the extremists. And you're seeing something similar. Obviously, it's not a one-to-one comparison, but you're seeing something similar in Ukraine. So don't just say, that's just like 1% or 0.5% of the population. That doesn't mean anything. It's not about the numbers. It's about the effectiveness and therefore the status that this gives them in the in how they alter the course of the war. Okay, so this is very important, very, very important to understand this concept. And just going back to the video, what he said here, how they were committing war crimes against the Russians. I saw one video. I don't know if it's the same thing he was talking about, because he said, I have videos. I don't know what he meant by that. And I speak French, so I don't know if he meant that he had filmed it himself or he had other videos. Well, not clear to me. I think you guys know which one I'm talking about. I can't show it to you, obviously, because it's too graphic, but it was a video of Russian prisoners of war being shot, right? They were already detained, and they were being it's not clear whether they were being killed or just wounded. Either way, it's completely illegal and a war crime. It doesn't matter if you shoot, if it's fatal or not. It's a war crime. You're not allowed to shoot prisoners of war. This is, when you capture, when you have a prisoner of war, you must give them medical treatment. You must allow Red Cross access to the prisoners. There are very clear guidelines. You cannot abuse, torture, demand anything other than name, rank, and serial number. It's very, very clear, even since World War I, World War II. And obviously, unfortunately, not everybody follows the rules. So just so we're clear, though, that video, and I don't know if that's the one he's referred to, that's a war crime. And if what he's saying is true, what he saw, that is certainly a war crime. And that's important to point out because the conventional wisdom right now is that only Russia is capable of committing war crimes. I'm sure they've committed war crimes. Yeah. I even pointed one of those out to you, the one where they were filming prisoners of war. And I know people might not, people have differing opinions on that. Fine. Okay, that, you can debate that because I was referring specifically to Snake Island. Remember? I don't want to go off on a tangent now, but my point is that the mainstream media narrative is now that Russia's evil and Ukraine is perfect and good and there are no Nazis, there's no such thing, and anybody saying otherwise is a lunatic or Russian propagandist and so on. So okay, what's your response to this guy? Because he's saying something very he's raising some really heavy points here, right? This is something good that he said. Look at this. Look what he says over here. He says, I'm shocked that Europe is sending weapons to them despite this. To me, a neo-Nazi with Nazi stripes is a neo-Nazi, right? That man with the SS letters, they are everywhere. And this isn't regarded as a problem for some reason. He's not wrong, is he? Right? He's not wrong. They're acting like, oh, well, this is protecting European values and so on. And for me, this reminds me again of what happened in Syria, where they were trying to diminish, downplay, denigrate, dismiss all sorts of concerns that the people being sent to overthrow Bashar al-Assad are Al-Qaeda, are extremists, right? And they would say, oh, you're just spreading propaganda. Really? Is that why there are 20,000, 30,000 fighters in Idlib? Those are made up numbers? They just fell out of the sky? Really? Again, people don't understand how close that was. You had Jaysh al-Islam and Faylaq al-Rahman literally a stone's throw away from Zaht al-Abbasin, which is Abbasid Square in Damascus. I mean, they're basically in Damascus, in Jobar. People just don't understand how close that is. They just don't get it. This is like I'm trying to find I'm trying to find a U.S. example or maybe something with London. It's like having, I don't know. It's like having, Staten Island. Again, obviously, Jobar is not the size of Staten Island, but it's like having Staten Island under complete control of a militia, and then saying, oh, this is just propaganda, this is made up. What? This is the kind of madness that we have to deal with. That people who are so ignorant, who can't even find Damascus on a map, who have no clue about Syria, nothing, not the faintest. They want to act like experts and talk about this and that. It's so ridiculous. It's so absurd. And the same people that brought this war to Syria, who created this situation, are doing the same thing in Ukraine. It's the same gang. It's the same ones who did Libya, who did Iraq. It's the same playbook, and we have to pay attention to these things. And this video that I just showed you reminded me of the French journalist who went also to Ukraine, and he said, who's in control? It's the Americans, right? And it's so funny because everybody in the studio is stunned. Like, this doesn't match what we've been told. Yeah, you're damn right. Yeah, it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe. And they're stunned, right? That you have an American coordinating the volunteers on the ground. And why is this significant? You might be thinking, yeah, but America's helping Ukraine. We know that already. No. America, the United States, is giving aid to Ukraine and trying to pretend, giving the appearance, trying to pretend that it's at an arm's length. Having U.S. guys on the ground, in the field, running the show, this is a different beast, right? And I mean, for me, honestly, whether you have advisors on the ground coordinating the volunteers, the foreign fighters, or you are sending weapons, I mean, me personally, for me, both of those are an act of war. But the idea is that what they're trying to tell you on the news is that America is not involved. There are no troops on the ground, and that's a lie. That's a lie. And when I was talking to Pepe, you guys remember that interview we did about 2 weeks ago? It remains to be seen, because he was talking about these rumors that you might end up finding some very high officials, French officials maybe, by the way, or some NATO officials that are inside Azovstal. Who knows? For now, it's just a rumor. Remains to be seen, right? We don't know. But I certainly think you have some boots on the ground. Absolutely. They said the same thing about Syria, by the way, right? Do you guys remember how Barack Obama went up there and he said we're going to send non-lethal aid? That was a lie, because then they were sending lethal aid, right? And the UK said the same thing. Oh, it's just radios and just logistical support and just a bit of non-lethal equipment. That was a lie. And then they said there are no troops on the ground. And then you find out, oh, the Special Air Service, which is Britain's special forces, like the Navy SEALs or the Delta Force, if you want sort of a comparison. The British SAS are in Syria all of a sudden. What happened to those no boots on the ground? And you have American special forces in Syria, and now the bases are out in the open, right? So this is what they do. They lie. They lie all the time, all the goddamn time, and then they talk about disinformation. Dude, Russia can't even compete with this. Like, no offense, but the Russians, they're really not good at disinformation. I think they give them far too much credit in the West, right? You always hear, oh, the Russians and they're spreading disinformation. They give them way too much credit, really way too much credit. Oh boy. Anyway, it's really interesting seeing some good French clips like this. I hope we see more of these. I could be completely wrong, but I get the impression, because I am following mainstream press in France, especially with the election recently. C'est la cata. C'est la cata. It's not much different than what you see in English. It's really not that much different. It's also like completely taboo to say anything, remotely good about Russia, or it's not even a question of like supporting Russia. It's like just, questioning the NATO narrative. That's really what it's about. You're not allowed to do that in general. So it's a bit refreshing to see things like this, a bit, right? Because there is only a bit of it. It's not that. Don't like make any don't be under any illusions. It's not that widespread that you have so much open debate and discussion and thought on French media. Unfortunately, it's quite similar to the rest of Western press.